Welcome to the Moffitt Method Podcast, where longtime strength and conditioning coach Tommy Moffitt explores everything from the art of coaching, improving performance, sports nutrition, and mental training. Now, welcome your host, Coach Tommy Moffitt.
Welcome to the Moffitt Method Podcast, and I am your host, Tommy Moffitt. If you are listening for the first time, please take a moment to subscribe to the podcast and leave us a review. The purpose of this podcast is both educational and an opportunity for me to introduce and highlight some of the great coaches, administrators, and friends that I have come to know and respect during my coaching career. I think the listeners will enjoy the variety of the guests and topics that are discussed and hopefully come away with a few knowledge bombs that propel your teams to greatness. Our incredible guest today is Coach Joey Guarascio from Florida Atlantic University in Boca Raton, Florida. Coach Guarascio joined the Florida Atlantic staff in January of 2020 as FAU's head strength and conditioning coach. Prior to FAU, Coach was also the head strength and conditioning coach for the Colorado State Rams. Prior to CSU, Coach served as the assistant strength and conditioning coach at the University of Mississippi, where he helped lead the football team to a pair of New Year's Six-Day bowl games, including the 2014 Peach Bowl and the 2016 Sugar Bowl, two very good games. In addition to coaching the football team, he oversaw the Rebels Pro Day and NFL Combine preparation programs. Prior to his arrival at Ole Miss, he was the director of strength and conditioning at Northwestern State University in Natchitoches, Louisiana. There, he oversaw all 17 varsity sports and specifically trained football, men's and women's basketball, and volleyball. Coach Guarascio began his coaching career as a graduate assistant at Northwestern State and then was an intern at both Florida Atlantic and LSU. Coach Guarascio earned an exercise science degree from the University of Sioux Falls in South Dakota and his master's degree in human performance with an emphasis in sports management from Northwestern State. He currently holds certifications with the CSCCA, NSCA. He is RPR Level 1 certified, USA Weightlifting Level 1 certified, NASM CES, and holds a Level 1 Precision Nutrition certification. Coach is married to his beautiful wife, Heather, and has a son, James, also known as Bubba, and daughter, Sophia. Welcome to the podcast, Coach. How are we doing today?
I'm doing great, Coach. Appreciate you having me on.
You're very welcome, man. And so my first question is I want to get right to this. And I didn't know that you'd been at FAU twice. So I'm looking forward to hearing your journey. So let's start with how you got into the field. How were some of your early influences and what continues to motivate you to keep striving to be the best?
Yeah, so like any meathead in high school, I fell in love with the training process and I remember I was 13 years old and I asked my mom, I said, hey, you're going to Barnes & Nobles, can you pick me up a book on training? She brought home Tudor Bompa's periodization book, which was about 10 years over my head. And, I'm trying to decipher and figure that out. But, I tried anything to get better in high school. I had those dumb platform shoes and everything, I just tried to get better. And I ended up going to junior college, and we had a strength coach, full-time strength coach named Dos Remedios. And he's put out a few books. Power Systems is one of them. And I didn't realize that was even a profession. I had the idea going in my head. I was going to go to school for business. I was going to try to be a stockbroker or one of those deals. And I saw Dos and met him and saw how he conducted himself and what went on and how we got better and just his approach. And my love for football is everything. The game's given me my whole life. So, I was like, this is a way to be around it. I never wanted to be a football coach because I hate recruiting. I hate film. I love being on the field with the guys. I love the camaraderie. I love the mentorship, but I never wanted to be that. So I ended up at University of Sioux Falls, and I actually met Dom Stadinsky, who was there. He was a player still at the time. Chad Traver was an alumni. Tyson Brown, who's at Mississippi State right now, was an alumni. And, me and Dom bonded right away because, we had the same goals in mind. Dom told me, he's like, I'm going to be a strength coach. I said, well, hell, that's what I want to be too. And Dom was actually coming off an internship in Notre Dame. So he kind of already was a year ahead of me. And he just laid the path out. He said, all right, what you got to do is you got to stack up internships. You got to get certified. You got to make sure you find some really, really credible and knowledgeable coaches to learn from. And you got to work your ass off and do whatever the hell they ask you to do. And I said, all right, that's a done deal. So I ended up graduating. I did an internship at Florida Atlantic here in 2011. And, first college experience, which was crazy. I think I applied to over 100 jobs that summer.
Wow.
I wasn't certified yet because that's what they told me to do. They said, if you want the next step is to get a graduate assistantship. Everyone's like, you got to get certified, you get a graduate assistantship. It's a step-by-step process. This is how this thing works. So my mind was set on that. I applied to all these jobs all summer, didn't hear a word, right? Nothing, because I wasn't certified yet. I ended up getting the certification the last week in July. I reapplied to about 30 jobs. I get 15 phone calls ASAP. And I was like, all right. I got a call from Joe Long, who was a former assistant of yours, yeah. and Coach Long told me, he goes, all right, I need you up here by Tuesday. And it was Thursday. And he's like, if you want the job, you got to get here by Tuesday. And I knew that just from talking to people, and I had to get connected to LSU in some form or fashion. I had to. I just saw all the good coaches that came out of there. You guys were on a hot streak at the time. It was right. I want to say it was right before your 2011 national championship run. Mm-hmm. And I just knew I needed to get around that program in some form or fashion. Knowing he was a former assistant, that's where I set my target at, my goal at. I took the GRE. I think it was Friday. I got 1 point higher than I needed to be. Me and my fiance at the time, we packed the car up by Saturday, and we were on the road on Sunday. I pulled up to Natchitoches, Louisiana on Tuesday night at about 9 p.m. And the first thing he did was hand me a stack of sheets and say, fill in the percentages. So, I filled out about 120 percentages. I got, it was a very valuable experience because the amount of on-the-floor coaching, it was unbelievable how much it advanced my own wisdom and my own knowledge as a coach, because I was forced in a role where I had to take on, I think I had 7 sports when I walked in the door, wow, plus football. So I had to grow up really fast. I had to learn how to run the floor. I had to learn how to run groups. I had to learn how to talk to athletes. I had to learn how to talk to coaches. It was an extremely valuable experience in my career that I got really early. I was only 22 at the time, and, I was thrown into that role, and it was just me and Joe Long. That was it. I got all my coursework done in a year, and I came down to see you a few times, and I kept putting it in your head. I was throwing little breadcrumbs. I was like, man, this is a beautiful place to work. I'll work here for free. And I think one day you were like, yeah, you know what? You should apply to intern. And I was like, oh, yes, sir. And it's crazy how life works because, I get down there and we were in intercession, and we were doing intercession workouts. I remember we only had a few guys up there like Mingo and Reed and some of those guys. And I was just getting to start to know the guys. And all of a sudden I get a phone call from the AD at Northwestern State, and he goes, we want you to interview for the head strength job. And I was blown away. I was like, I remember talking to Eric Donovan. I was partially torn. I was like, man, I need to get paid because I'm working for free. But I was like, man, this is it. This is where I want to be. I want to be at this level. I want to work for people like Coach Moffitt. I want to be around assistants like Ryan Philo and Ben and, Truck at the time and all those guys. And I was like, man, they just do it at such a high level. Like, it really opened my eyes to where I need to be and also, where I want to be. I ended up getting the job. I was actually in Baton Rouge. I got the call at 6 p.m. Workouts for that next Monday. The first run group was at 6 a.m. So I did that 2.5-hour drive. I got there about 9, 10 o'clock. I had 2 brand new GAs that I'd never met, never talked to. We sat down and I told them how we're going to do things that next day. Took an 1.5-hour nap, and at about 5 o'clock we did setup, and about 6 o'clock until about 4 o'clock that next day we were rolling. So it was a crazy experience. I got to be there for, I think it was 2 years total, and I interviewed with Coach Jackson actually the year that spring before he actually hired me. So I interviewed in May, right before the CSCCA. I think it was in Missouri at that time, and I interviewed with him, and I actually didn't get the job. And, for all the young coaches listening out there, it's not – sometimes it's about timing, so you always want to make sure you follow up and ask, how could I have done better on my interview process? What can I do better to get better? It's always about following up and keeping those networks open, because the end of that last season at Northwestern State, Coach Jack called me and he was like, "You in the truck yet?" And I was like, "I am now. Let's roll." And I spent 4 years up there, had an unbelievable experience up there, learning from Coach Jack, who, again, one of your former assistants, who is one of the best in the nation, in my opinion. Just how he talks to the players, his program, learned a tremendous amount. And then just being around assistants like Dom and Anthony Crosby and Lanier Coleman, and, being able to talk to Matt Shadid and connect with him, because I was actually taking his spot. It really advanced my career. I got lucky enough to get hired on at Colorado State, spent a year as an associate head, and I got promoted to head strength coach under Mike Bobo. Unfortunately, we got fired. That's just part of the business. But then this opportunity, happened down here, and I couldn't turn it down. It's just, being in Florida. My family's from Florida. They're down here in Florida now. And, I knew, the potential of this place is high. So it was going to be a fun experience.
Wow. So it's amazing, how everything just kind of falls in place for people who work hard. Prior preparation, we've heard this 1,000 times, prior preparation prevents poor performance. But just like a lot of the people that I've had on here, their careers started with the realization that this is actually something that you can do for a living. You would not believe the number of people that I have interviewed that say, "I didn't know that you could have a career as a strength coach." And they had this undeniable love for, what they did. And then when they realized that you can actually make a career and a living out of it, that's when everybody jumped in with both feet. So it's good to hear. So let's get right into the nuts and bolts. Okay. So anybody that knows you, or anyone that has read anything that you've written, knows that you're very data driven in your approach to training. So how does the data that you get from the various technologies contribute to how you program for all the different drills and exercises in your program?
Well, I think data is extremely important, right? I look at it as like it's the dashboard of a car. Okay, you wouldn't get in a car and take off and do a trip without knowing how much gas, oil pressure, how fast you're going, all these different things. And the same goes for athletes. The old days of guessing about what is actually happening is over, in my opinion. I think there's too many resources and too many affordable resources from a technology standpoint to have better training means and to have a better idea about the stress imposed on the athletes. So, the eye-opening part for me was when we started to look at our GPS data and our practice data. And I realized just how far off we were with some of the general training means that were in place there. Specifically, it's like we looked at, okay, what's our total yardage count for a receiver in a week? And it ended up being almost 21,000 yards. All right. So me thinking, okay, we're going to do, 10 hundreds and think that's going to be okay. And they're going to be sufficient enough to go into practice and run all day and be conditioned and avoid injury and all these soft tissue injuries that occur. It's ignorant to think that now, to look upon it. So the things that we use, we look at GPS because we want to reverse engineer from what the demands of the game are. All right. So I want to know what's actually happening in each position group. Because I look at it, and it's crazy because every position in football is different. Every position. My right guard from my left guard is different, okay, depending upon the scheme. My tackles versus my guards is different. My tight ends, if he's a on-the-line tight end or if he's an unattached tight end, different. My slots are different. My everyone. So every position has different demands. Now, are they completely off base to where you got to change every single little thing in the program? Absolutely not. But is there wrinkles that you need to add in to help suffice some of those demands, to help bridge the gap and help prepare these players for practice? Absolutely. Because my main philosophy is for them to adapt and thrive in practice. If we don't practice well, if we don't have good practice habits, if we can't be robust and resilient to injuries in practice, you're not going to be a good team. I don't care how fast everybody is on your team, you're not going to be a good team. You have to be able to practice at a high level. So, I mean, when we looked at the GPS data and just saw like, man, we're not getting them ready for practice. I'm not getting them ready for the grind at camp. I'm not even close. And then I also looked at, okay, from a performance standpoint, what are some important things that each position has uniquely to them, right? Like, so like we looked at our receivers, yet top speed is definitely one of the higher KPIs of that position. Our O-linemen never go over 12 miles an hour, right? But they also have 3 times the amount of change of directions than a receiver does in a practice. Mm-hmm. So we started looking at things differently, like, okay, not only are these demands important, but what are these performance metrics that we need to drive that we're seeing be exposed and used in a ton in the game, but we aren't taking as seriously or putting a big emphasis on in our training. So that was the main thing that we saw was, okay, like our big guys need to do more change of direction work. They need more starting strength work. They need more isometric work. They need higher levels of relative body strength, right? Because they're in the business of moving people and moving themselves.
Yep.
In order to move yourself, and when you're a bigger dude, you need more strength. It's just a matter of fact. They need high levels of rate of force development. They do, because the guy that gets his foot in the ground the fastest, the guy that can punch the fastest and the hardest wins. Mm-hmm. Okay, so those were the main things that we saw. So from up front, both sides of the ball, those are things that we wanted to make sure that we attacked. And then we put in place testing methods in our training, not separate from our training, but in our training where we can measure these things, right? So when we looked at starting strength, we did barbell jumps off a box. Okay, so we put roughly anywhere between 20 to 30% of the back squat. We would look at the peak velocity. We have VBT, so we looked at the peak velocity of the jump, and we were measuring, okay, like if that velocity is going up, then we could generalize and say rate of force development is increasing. Okay, so we're doing our job. We don't do 1RM testing for our big guys or for our team in general. We do 90% testing. So we'll put their 90% of the 1RM on, and then we'll look at their average velocity. And then based off that, if they're getting stronger, that average velocity should be much higher than what it was previously. And then we can up their weight, and I have a conversion for all that stuff in Excel to figure out, okay, well, this guy needs a 2% increase in his 1RM. This guy needs a 7% increase in his 1RM, so we could progress training. But that's something that we measured, right? Like our big guys, vertical jump and broad jump are extremely important metrics that we looked at. So when we're in a lifting session, a guy might be cleaning, his partner standing behind him. Hey, go get a vert, go, see you later, come right back to me, get it done. And we're constantly measuring those as markers of explosiveness and also relative body strength. When you look at your skill guys, like things to me that are extremely important, like you need guys that can run on the outside, right? You need guys that can run. Guys that can roll, they have success. Now, the caveat to that is you need guys that can break and that can also change direction at extremely rapid rates. And I think that's where you're seeing and I love it. I absolutely love it. But you're seeing a push towards maximum velocity sprinting on Twitter and all. Mm-hmm. And it's always trending. But it has to be within the context of the task being asked of them. Meaning, like, I got an argument with A.J. Brown about this when he was training in the summer. He's like, I run all my routes at 20 miles an hour. And excuse my language, I said, that's bullshit. I said, no, you don't. I said, you live in between 16 and 18 miles an hour. That's your zone. Now, I said, how you get there is what makes you different, because you can accelerate at a fast rate. Mm-hmm. But I said, you live between 16 and 18 miles an hour. Then don't get me wrong, you could hit 21, 22, which he's touched. But I was like, you live in that zone. And I said, so we put the GPS on him. We come back, all right, he ran a route tree. I think he ran probably 12, 15 routes. We come back, 17.6 was his average peak velocity. Laughed my ass off. And I'm just like, all right. But again, we need speed in the context of the sport, meaning that if you're a track guy and you could run a 10-3 in a straight line, but as soon as you deviate, you dramatically drop your velocity down because you don't feel comfortable, you're not going to be effective in a game that is dominated by maneuverability and change of direction. You're not going to be good at it. It won't happen. So we want to not only have maximum velocity sprint capabilities to take the top off it or a DB to go hawk somebody, but at the same time, we want maneuverability. So we want to be able to run an arc. We want to be able to run an S run. All right, we want to be able to see you do a 90-degree cut, a 45-degree cut, and a 180-degree cut with extreme efficiency and extremely fast. And then we want to be able to increase reactivity. So we want to be able to see you do it with a defender in front of you, or we want to see it with an offensive player in front of you, where you have to react off it. So those are things that we measure all the time. So in the summertime, especially as we branch down and climb that continuum of specificity, we're going to start testing more applicable, more specific things versus just, okay, we got fly 10s. No, what does their S run look like? Yeah. What does their curve run look like? Mm-hmm. All right. And then we're going to start to implement those in, and that's what we're going to take our testing to. I think any data should audit your program, right? It guides you. It gives you clues. Sometimes it can be misleading, right? Like sometimes I look at some people online. It's like, oh, our vertical jumps dropped 3% today. We need to change everything. That's not always the case, right? So you got to understand trends. You got to understand also the stress imposed on the athlete. Like you hammer a kid with eccentric squats and then you have him go jump on a force plate the next day. Yeah, you should automatically know his dad is going to be down.
Yeah, not a good day for RSI mod.
No, and that to me it's you got to understand trends. You got to understand kids as well. Yeah, because I think that's something, and you definitely could probably speak to this more than I. Some kids, they come off the weekend, they had a fun weekend, they test they test bad on Mondays, and then all of a sudden Thursdays they're back into it and they're rolling. But that Monday always kills you.
Yeah, our Thursday testing on the force plate, for the most part, there was always, a difference, depending on the time of the year, but in season, especially if it was an away game or we had an early afternoon game here in Baton Rouge, our Monday jumps were always down. Because travel would take, put some wear and tear on you. And then if we had an early afternoon game, the guys would go out Saturday night and, instead of having 3 or 4 hours before the bar closes, they have 8 hours before the bar closes. So our Monday jumps were always down. So yeah, you're correct. Now, I see you using a lot of timing gates. So you've got those timing gates set up. You're not out there testing. You're out there training. And you're looking at the velocities and all the different runs that you do to decide what is next. You use that information that you're getting from the timing gates to determine what the next phase of the training program is going to be. But you do it in training versus I'm putting timing gates out today and testing the guys, correct?
Absolutely. And I think the timing gates do two things. Like you said, it can help guide you because if your guys – you have this great plan on paper and you're in week 3 and you're expecting these guys to roll. Like, you're all right, this is going to be a fast day. And you go out there and the marks aren't very good. It puts you back and it makes you reflect on what you're going to do next. It could be, okay, we're functionally overreaching. These guys are just wiped out. Maybe the weight room volume is too high. Maybe that's what's catching up and hurting some of the performance numbers outside. It just makes you you turn into Sherlock Holmes. It makes you question what you're doing, which is always a good thing, right? You should always be questioning what you're doing. You should be like, is it working? Are we getting better? Are the numbers providing that, okay, is this the best plan of action at this point in time for this training? And then with the data, you'll be able to see that. The second thing the timing gates do, and like you said, we do it with training. So we have 2 sets of browers and I have 2 sets of dashers. And what it does is it drives intent. It drives intent and it sparks competition. And, with speed training specifically, anything to do with power and speed, you need maximal output. Mm-hmm. If you're not obtaining maximal output, you're doing sub-maximal work. It's not driving, it's not pushing the ceiling up. You're not coming close to it. Then, you start, what we do is we call it the PR line because guys, the PR wave, is one guy will roll, let's say we're doing a fly 10. He's rolling, he hits a 9.3, which is screaming, which is averaging 22 miles an hour. And then the next guy just takes off before that guy even finishes running. The next guy, you just keep calling out fast times. And it really energizes the training session. Yeah. And it makes it fun. It makes it competitive. And they're really getting a really good training stimulus out of it. And it also, again, if you're in that session and you have 4 reps planned or 5 reps planned on those fly 10s, but by rep 3, no one's really hitting good numbers anymore. They're really starting to come down and it's just sinking. It's also a good mark for you as a coach. Like, all right, you know what? Blow the horn, next station, roll.
Yep.
Let's go.
Exactly.
So like you said, there's a lot of benefits to testing and training. The thing is being efficient. You got to be efficient. You got to have the resources. If I'm a high school coach and I have one set of timing gates and I'm by myself with 110 kids, it's going to be hard to do. It's going to be hard to do, but if you're in a college setting, you got a bunch of interns, you got 5 assistants, you got some capable people out there. I mean, it could become an easy, efficient deal where like we've got to the point where we process our numbers and we put them into Excel sheets before we leave the field. So that is it's instantly accessible to us as soon as we get done. Because with tablets and iPads and all this stuff now, I got much more tech savvy people than me on my staff, but they come in right away. And it's like, all right, what's the average time for our skill guys? And boom, it's spit out, it's done. We rank and we put out where our guys stand as well. Because everyone wants to go to the NFL, right? At least they say that. I want to be an NFL player. The beauty of it is with all this data out here now is you can compare yourself to all these combine numbers and NFL players. Mm-hmm. So I tell our guys all the time, you're a running back. You won't go to the NFL, but you're running 19 miles an hour right now where the average running back runs 21 in pads. All right. Yeah. Step your game up, man. Get to work. It's a motivational tool.
Right. And you get immediate feedback and it's accurate for the most part, within a few very minute percentage points, it's extremely accurate. And for years we used experience and intuition, and that's how I grew up in this field. And talking to the players about how they felt, the day of training, day after training, et cetera. But today you have evidence-based data points that you can train for, and it makes it so much more efficient. And you get more bang for your buck, and you're wasting, like, for instance, if you're running fly 10s and you see, the velocities going down, if it's going to be a speed workout, you got to cut it out immediately and move on to the next station, like you said. So it is so true. So true. Absolutely. You've talked a lot lately about deceleration training, and I've seen you comment on it numerous times. So how does this training fit into the training calendar, and why is it so important?
Well, I look at it like this. So anytime we have 4 general skills that are a must for us to train. Okay, they're skills because as soon as you start to train them and rehearse them, you get better at them. Okay, so the 4 skills we look at, I look at acceleration as a skill. Running at maximal speed is a skill. I look at deceleration as a skill, and then I look at change of direction as a skill. Okay, those are 4 skills that are going to be in our program year-round that we're going to find a way to train and rehearse those skills that we become better at them, right? Because to me, those 4 skills enhance specific skills like break point for a DB on a ball, or receiver route trees, or even all those things, right? So you can name an instance in the game of football. Those 4 skills are predominant in almost every play. I used to put an emphasis on 3, so we didn't have the acceleration in there. And in 2020, we had a rash of ankle injuries, right? Because everything usually starts with a problem, right? Like usually when you have innovation, it starts with a problem. And we had a rash of ankle injuries, and it blew my mind because I was like, what's going on? Like, why are we, what's going on? Are we addressing it? Are there things in the program that we're doing to mitigate these injuries? What's the deal? And what we found is majority of our ankle injuries were in a deep knee and hip flex position, okay, where they were either stopping, okay, or in the process of stopping, where they had bad foot placement and they rolled their ankle. So immediately it came to my mind like, okay, like we need to have some kind of deceleration training. And it's funny how things work because one of my assistants was like, hey, I'm watching this deceleration course. You need to check it out. So right away I hop on and I buy it. And it's Damian Harper, who's out. He's a PhD from England, and he's basically like He's done 15, 20 research papers on it. That's his whole body of research is deceleration. And I'm watching it, and it just made too much sense. You know, when you read something or you watch something and it makes too much sense and you're pissed off because you're like, I should have known that already.
Yeah.
Like, I should have known that already. And what it looked like, what we're looking at is deceleration comes down to 4 components, right? So the first one is going to be at the top of it is going to be dynamic stability. Okay, the ability to control your body and stop and control your body, right? Control your posture.
Yeah.
Okay, whether it's knee, whether it's your ankle, whether it's your hip, whatever it is, full body posture is going to be. It's going to be the reactive strength, which we all hammer, right? We all do plyometrics. We destroy plyometrics. We all do a ton of it, bounds, hurdle hops, depth jumps, whatever your flavor is, we do a ton of it. The other 2 are ones where I really, as I looked at my programs, I was really lacking. So eccentric rate of force development, okay, eccentric rate of force development, how fast do I load that stretch, right? Because that's huge, okay?
Yeah.
And then eccentric peak force, which is going to be how much force can I load that stretch with? How much force can that handle? And those are the 2 where I was missing out the most. You know, when I looked at dynamic stability too, I looked at it was a technical element to it. Okay, right? It's a technical element. Just like acceleration has specific like landmark positions that you want to see the athlete hit, the same can be said for deceleration.
Yes, it can.
And the funny thing is it's just the opposite. If we're familiar with acceleration, it's the opposite of acceleration. So where we want a forward lean, we want to push back behind our center of mass, where we want our center of mass in front of our foot position, right? Like deceleration is the opposite. Like where we want extension and acceleration. We want flexion and deceleration. We want our chest to be more upright in deceleration. We want foot placement in front of my body versus behind it. So it literally is the opposite, but it has all those same landmarks that we see with acceleration that we harp on, you know, good coaches talk about all the time and they try to improve upon, but it was something that we just neglected. Like I didn't train it as its own specific skill. And I was like, we're neglecting it. So we put an emphasis on it. All right. So we started doing weighted snap downs, which I love, right? Like a lot of people do the unweighted snap downs.
Right.
Weighted snap downs put way more significant eccentric stress on that body, way more mechanical tension and loading on that body. And the beauty of it.
Do you do it with a barbell or a weighted vest?
Coach, you can. It's limited to your creativity.
Yeah.
You can do it with a barbell. You can do it with a weight vest. You could do it with dumbbells. You could do it with the slosh pipes, whatever you want it, whatever your flavor is, whatever you progress them to. You could do it single leg, you could do it double leg, you could go split stance, you could, whatever you can figure out and make work for your program, you can implement it in there. Okay. And again, when you look at it's increasing eccentric peak force because it's overloaded, right? I looked at we all look at the concentric force velocity curve. All right. We got strength, speed, we got speed, strength, we got all these things. All I did was is flip it to the eccentric side. I'm like, how can we turn around and make a fast eccentric exercise? How can we make a more force-driven eccentric exercise? Well, you increase the load, you slow the exercise down, but it has that point to it, right? So peak force for us eccentrically was going to be, and rate of force was going to be those snap downs. When you wanted just to hit peak force, eccentric peak force, that was going to be controlled lowering. So like made popular by Cal Dietz, made popular by Poliquin, you know, the late Charles Poliquin, you know, and then really now there's a ton of research coming out on accentuated eccentric loading, which is super maximal loading eccentrically. You know, that's where that peak force is gonna really amp up. That's where you're gonna really be able to attack that. And if you attack it just like a lot of strength coaches do now with concentric training, okay, we're gonna get them really strong. Then we're going to transition to really powerful and fast, and then we're going to get specific. You could take that same approach with your eccentric work, and we're going to train it year-round, right? If it's important, if it's one of those 4 pillars, we got to handle it year-round. It has to be in your program. Now, are the volume and intensity going to vary based on the time of the year? Absolutely. When we're more strength dominant, we're going to tone down how much explosive rate of force development eccentric work we're doing, right? I wouldn't just come off a 3-week break and just have them go bound for 50 yards. Like that would blow them up. Okay, we're going to progress into it, and we're going to build upon each phase. But it's going to be in there year round. It's something we're going to practice year round. Like even now in season, we do drop jumps and we do altitude landings. So I'll do altitude landings all the way up to 12 inches higher than what their average vertical is right now. And it's a great, and it's our guys handle it. And it's, you know, knock on wood, we've had a very successful year from an injury standpoint, very successful. You know, from whether it's soft tissue or it's season-ending injuries, we haven't had much. And a lot of that has to go back to, I think, our eccentric strength, our peak force, and our eccentric rate of force is extremely high going into the season. We had higher reserves than were what needed for the tasks at hand on the field of play. So we didn't break down because we're overloaded and fatigued, because we had higher abilities than what was being demanded all the time.
Mm-hmm. Now, are you measuring this with a force plate? How are you measuring their eccentric braking rate?
So what we did was in the offseason, the way we looked at their eccentric braking, so we looked at what we did is we had a 10-yard acceleration, what we timed. So we timed it. We put timing gates.
Yeah.
If you didn't hit within 90% of what your average 10-yard split was, we threw the data out because that means you're cheating the test.
Right.
Okay. So but we had a 10-yard drive. And then what we did was we put a camera on the side. And with video analysis, we looked at time to stop, how long did it take you to stop, and then distance to stop.
So you actually did it on the field versus doing it on a force plate.
Yeah, because
very practical.
We didn't have a force plate. And with the video analysis, I could get 4 or 5 lanes going at one time. So again, it doesn't bog it down. Now, if you know you're at a SEC program and you got 5 force plates, you could definitely I'm not saying don't do it that way, but I wanted to see if we directly influence the task itself.
Well, so a person's jump strategy can change all of that. So you manipulate force plate data by how you jump, and you can see when guys are jumping to manipulate their scores. And so by doing it and doing it on the field, they're football players. So, you know, they're not high jumpers and triple jumpers. They're football players. So it's really, really neat that you took it to the field and you did it with video, because, you know, the video that y'all have available to you shows, you know, in real time, you know, it's got the counter on there. So you're getting accurate times. You're not doing it with a stopwatch. You're doing it with the timing that's embedded in the video, which is extremely accurate. Correct?
We use Dartfish. So it was.
Oh, you know, okay. Wow. So you use Dartfish. Yeah, even better.
Yeah. So we put that timestamp on it. And then what we found is are more explosive, and our better football players all had faster deaccelerations in shorter distances, which is not, it's not a shocker, right? Like, oh, go figure. So, but it wasn't our guys that were just outright burners with speed.
Right. That's a knowledge bomb, man. So I have this soundboard right here, and I don't have a bomb, but I wish I had I'm trying to get a bomb there, but that's a knowledge bomb right there, man. That is awesome.
So it was, because again, the game is, you need to have the capability to run fast.
Yeah.
I'm not knocking that. You do. You need to have that ability to just open up and go get it. Right? When you look at special teams, when you look at all these different things, you know, really good players have that ability to get out.
Yeah.
But the game is played stop and go style between what our skill players between 14 and 18 miles an hour.
Yeah.
So if I have a guy that can not only stay closer to 18 miles an hour, but also can stop faster than you, that means he can hold that speed longer and then decelerate faster, which is going to create more separation or more closure if he's on defense than the opponent, which is what it's all about.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Which is what it's all about. So once we started really putting like that emphasis on it and putting it into our workouts and emphasizing it and creating those technical models and then driving it in the weight room with eccentric reinforcement peak, the other side of it was our concentric testing numbers went through the roof.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
Absolutely.
They went crazy. Like our vertical jump numbers from the start of summer to the end of summer, it's like unbelievable. Like I told our guys, I was like, I can't put these out. because people are going to
yeah, there's a couple of variables in play here. One is the more force you generate eccentrically, the greater the amount of kinetic energy that is stored, and thus you have a greater concentric action that follows it. So that's one. But two, when you're looking at that much eccentric data, you're keeping your guys fresh. So for those numbers to go up, then you have to be fresh. And if you're overtrained, those eccentric numbers, no matter what you do, are going to go down, because a lot of people who use force plate data for as a fatigue, looking at fatigue in season or off season for that matter, the eccentric information that you get from the force plate is one of the things that they use to determine fatigue. So you're killing two birds with one stone. You're keeping your guys fresh because, again, the eccentric phase of it is so important to be fresh. And then two, you're developing more kinetic energy in things like your vertical jump or your counter movement jumps and cleans and jerks and snatches and back squats and everything else. So your guys are going to be more explosive because of the amount of work that you have done eccentric.
Absolutely. And then what we try to do too is, like, when we looked at compatibility of training, like what training elements will fit together.
Mm-hmm.
Like
That's what's going to be my next question. Yeah. How does it all fit within the program?
So we looked at it. If we're going to attack like just say eccentrics in general, okay, we knew that things that we did already, like maximum velocity sprinting, curve linear running, is a high stress eccentrically. Mm-hmm. So what I wanted to do is I didn't want any murky water. Like I love Boo Snyder. Like Boo's one of training emphasis. Like he's one of my main mentors on it, and he always says, "I drink whiskey to get drunk. I drink water to hydrate." And I wanted to be very, very clear and concise in the training stimulus and the stress. So what we did is we paired all of our what we deemed high intensity eccentric work on our same day. So the day that we're doing maximum velocity sprinting, the day that we're doing curve linear running, the day that we're doing decelerations, that's all happening on the same day. The day that we're doing really, really high stimulus and high intense plyometrics, same day, right? When we go in the weight room, if we're doing eccentric rate of force development, that's that same day. If we're doing peak force, we're doing altitude drops, that's that same day. If we're doing accentuated eccentric loading, that's that same day. If we're doing our Russian leans that day, they were doing it that same day. We're going to make sure that the themes of the week match the training emphasis we're trying to hit, right? So like some people could call it conjugate, whatever you want. We had a concentric day and from a high intensity training stimulus standpoint, and then we had our eccentric day where we will put a high emphasis on eccentric training. So we wanted to create clear stressors on those days, not only to make it to pair those training elements and have the compatibility of the day work, but also so that we can plan the recovery necessary going into it, right? Like I'm not going to do my eccentric work on a Monday because I knew that by the time residual effect, you get to Thursday, them dudes are waxed, they're gone, and then with that comes along soft tissue injuries, weird ruptures, all those different things. So knowing that, we're like, okay, we're going to put that on a Thursday. Knowing that Friday, from a conditioning standpoint, wasn't going to be anything where they'd have to open up, okay, and which was more at a tempo pace. And then in the weight room was going to be more upper body dominant. And then going into the weekend, we'll have almost 4 days off before we have another high intensity stimulus. Also knowing that if we did concentric work on Monday, that it could potentiate that Thursday, right? Because you talk about guys being slow off the weekend. Something Boo talks a bunch about is getting rate coding firing back faster through the introduction of high intensity elements before you hit the highest intensity elements in that training week. So that's something that we looked at and we're like, okay, we can build our week up into that. And we could also attack some training elements and some things and clean it up to where we have specific emphasis on specific days. And we can make it work for us, and we can really navigate that recovery window to maximize that adaptation, right? And know that, okay, we can turn around. I can train them hard this Thursday, knowing I got those 4 days to really get their bodies back,
Right. Well, all right. So taking all of this into mind, how closely do you work with the football staff and make recommendations to them regarding practice and their preparation so that it aligns with what you are doing in the weight room or outside? Or do you take what they're wanting to do and then do you design what you're going to do? How does that relationship go?
Yeah, definitely. In season, I think you got to keep the main thing, right? Like you got to understand coach's vision and plan, and you have to adapt to it. Now, does that mean that you need to just go blindly and do everything? And no, I think there definitely has to be input, and there has to be a relationship of trust between the information I'm giving you, and then they have to go and figure. I give recommendations. It's not my practice. It's not my show anymore. I got to give those recommendations. I got to make sure he understands what's going on so that he can make a better decision on how to do things. Now, I think the best success I've found with implementing subtle changes into practice is through assistant coaches.
Yeah.
Right. Because the head coach is seeing big picture. Yeah. Right. And you get coaches that come from specific coaching trees. Hey, we're doing 25 periods no matter what. Yes, sir. That's fine. Like that's what you feel comfortable with. That's what you want to do. It is what it is. I think the adaptability and the interventions come through the assistant coaches. Yeah. Okay. And I do have a head coach that empowers our assistant coaches to move ND periods, move special team periods, change some of the things they're doing.
Oh, wow.
To really help with that. So like one of the biggest interventions I think we've seen is we've moved kickoff further up in practice for where it was. Right? Because we want kickoff to be fast.
Yeah.
Not only because that's how it's supposed to be played, but we're repping 3 different teams of kickoff. So I'm getting 33 to 40 guys high speed running.
Yeah.
So when I look about
it, it's running that you'll get out of the practice in the game. It's kickoffs.
It's kickoff.
It's a big play.
And I'm looking at, okay, well, how can we retain maximum velocity sprinting capabilities that we've built? Well, give them exposures, right? I look at if you're hitting anywhere between 90 to 95% of your best MPH, right? Your best top mile per hour, then we're good. I got to hit it once, maybe twice in a week. That's it to maintain those skills. So with kickoff, we moved it up in practice, and then we entice our guys. We have a horn that has a siren on it. So they run their rep. If someone hits 20 miles an hour, the horn goes off, the siren goes off. All the strength coaches drop down and do 20 push-ups for 20 miles an hour. We call the guys' names out. So now, and then our special team coach, Chad Lunsford, who's a great dude, he's really bought into it. Yeah. So he'll put the graph up of all the guys' top miles per hour in the special teams meeting. He'll make them stand up, and they'll applaud all the guys.
Yeah.
So now it's become embedded into our practice. Yeah. So now we're getting a training element, and we're getting it taken care of through the sport itself because of that. So that was one of the big interventions. You know, I think anytime you have an extremely powerful kid, you have to watch their volume.
Yeah.
Right? You have to watch their volume just because every ground contact, every collision is more impactful than the average Joe. So like sometimes with some of these guys that we have that are on that higher level of athlete, you know, just talking to coach mid-practice, you know, whether it's receiver coach. We have a receiver here who jumps 45 inches on vertical. It's insane. He floats. I got multiple videos of him just floating.
Yeah.
All right. He was on Bruce Feldman's top 100 freak list. He cleans 345. He's just a freak athlete. But he has low threshold for volume because he's so powerful.
Yep.
You know, and with him, it's like, okay, I'll get Billy Gonzalez, our receiver coach. He does a great job. He's like, Coach, where's he at?
Good dude, man. Yeah.
Great dude. He'll be like, Coach, where's he at? I'll be like, you got about 3, maybe 4 more periods with him. Yeah. You know, okay, so if I send this period, I get more at the end. Yes, sir. Boom, there it is. That's intervention right there.
Yeah.
And we're getting more performance, and we're getting better production out of the kid, and we're keeping the kid safe. So, you know, I think you have to do a really good job informing the head coach on the big picture, but with the assistant coaches where you make the most headway. So, and that goes into like they got to buy into you. So, like, and I know I'm preaching to the choir, but the assistant coaches got to be your biggest advocates.
Yeah. Well, so that's what I tell everyone. You know, anytime we had an issue with a player, you know, whether it was volume related or whatever, injury related, any issues that we had, we always went to the assistant coaches first before going to the head coach, because like you said, the head coach is worried about the big picture. And I learned my lesson the hard way by going and talking to the head coach and saying, Coach, we have to do this. We have to do this. This was at the beginning of Catapult. And the coach thought or assumed that I was telling him he wasn't doing a good job with practice. And so instead of taking a global approach, we took a more finite approach, and we found it, just like yourself, much more beneficial for the player to go to the position coach. Because if coach wants a 10-minute period at a specific, with a specific portion of the game, he wants his 10-minute period there. And whether or not your best wide receiver, your best corner gets all of those reps or some of that reps, the head coach doesn't care about that. He just wants to make sure that that 10-minute period is run like he wants to do. So I'm shaking my head in agreement. That's exactly right.
Yeah, and I look back. So when I was at Ole Miss, Coach Jack, the fanciest piece of technology I had in Northwestern State was Pandora Plus. All right, like I had a chocolate milk machine, and I had Pandora Plus. That was it. And I get to Ole Miss, and I'm trying to find a role in the department, and he's like, "Hey, we're getting GPS and we're getting accelerometers. You're going to do it." And I'm like, "Yes, sir." Like, all right, let's ride, right? So we get it, and I'll never forget. This is a funny story because like the same thing. Like I learned the hard way. Right, I'm so excited. We're at practice. I make the first printout. I give it to Coach Jack, and he goes, "Well, what the hell does it mean?" And I was like, I was so caught up in the fact that I could just make the printout and get all the data in one place. I was like, "Oh, that's a good question, Coach. I don't know what this means." But like you said, like it's you get so much more done, right? Because they need, and here's the thing is you can't saturate them. And it can't always be the end of the world if a guy has a spike. That's the thing I figure, like, oh my gosh, he's 1,000 yards over his normal. Well, is it every day for the last 4 days, or is it just one time? And you can't be the boy that cries wolf all the time.
Yeah.
You can't. Now if it's something substantial, you go to him and you talk with him, but it's got to be quick. It's got to be like, you got to give them the solution. You got to tell them, hey, here's the problem. This is what you do. And then you walk away. Yeah. Because they don't have time, and they're not sports scientists. They're not strength coaches. They're football coaches. Yeah. They want to know, okay, well, how the hell do I fix it? If it's that easy to fix, good. Let's move on. And that's all they want.
All right. We've talked a lot about acceleration, deceleration, top speed. Let's talk a little bit about conditioning. Controversial topic, man, to a lot of people. And, I found myself, probably the biggest thing that we had to deal with here was training camp. We spent our time conditioning for the first 3 days of training camp than we did anything else, because if you practice right, then you're going to be conditioned for the game. So when you program for conditioning, is there a lot of specificity for the different position groups, or is it more fundamental energy system development for the whole team? Go into that a little bit if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. I think specificity is key, right? Because we bash the term endurance just means repeatability of a specific task. Right. And we immediately think running is endurance, just running, blindly running. And you've heard it all the time. I mean, you've been doing this a lot longer than I. How many times we've all made the mistake? We go out, we run 110s, we run gassers, we run all these different things. They go to their first practice and they go, I've never been this tired before. Yeah. Right. And then the football coach is like, oh, we need to get him in football shape. Like, as much as you don't want to be pissed off, in the back of your head, you're like, damn it. Like,
yeah. Oh, yeah. There's a difference.
There is. And the difference is the specificity. It's the movement, right? And it's also the rest recovery times. Mm-hmm. Okay, so if we want – I do think that there is times in the training year where you need to be extremely general in your conditioning modalities. I do. There is times where general work capacity, aerobic capacity, those things need to get handled. I think as soon as you start to creep towards a competitive period of time in the training calendar, it needs to get to where those rest ratios are the same, All right. And then you also introduce the movements in those work to rest ratios as well. And the ways that we've done it here is, everyone always talks about fourth quarter, right?
Yeah.
Well, why is fourth quarter effective in conditioning athletes? It's because it is a steroided, souped up version of Indy.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. Work to rest ratios are roughly 5 to 7 seconds of work, 30 to 45 seconds of rest. What does that sound like to me? That sounds like a play.
Yeah.
Okay. And then when you pair it with, there's change direction elements, there's agility elements of it, there's all these different things. And that's just one example. So when we looked at that, because I know people feel specific, either indifferent or they love it, right? They either hate or love fourth quarter work or circuits or whatever. To me, it's a great way to turn around and increase specificity. Now, I think if all you're doing is 5-10-5s, I think you're missing the boat.
Right.
I think when you start to integrate tag off drills, like actual chase tackle drills, mirror drills, when you start to integrate specific angles of cutting, I think when you increase maneuverability drills, when you start to implement those things in, and then you still have those work to rest ratios, you not are only increasing movement competency, but now you're also increasing that specific endurance and that specific conditioning. And I think that's where you can really, really start to see, and bridge the gap from that transition from we're training to now it's season.
Yeah.
Okay. And then I think another thing that you have to look at as well, and I think we hit on this a little bit earlier in the podcast, is what are the maximal thresholds of total volume of a practice week, of a practice cycle. All right. I have to know that, right? So what is my average practice volume for my receivers? It's going to be anywhere between 6,000 to 7,000 total yards. It's going to be anywhere between 80 to 140 high-speed yards. They're going to have roughly about 10 to 15 high-intensity decels. They're going to have about 25 to 30 high-intensity accelerations. That's in one practice. Now, what does the entire week look like? Now, what percentage of that am I in my summer week one of training? And how close can I get to that throughout the summer? Because if I'm at 80 to 90% of those thresholds going into camp, I feel really good.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because now that little 10%, it might be only 1,000 yards extra. Okay. It might only be 2 more accelerations. Like, I could feel really good about saying, they're ready. Well, how do you know they're ready? Well, coach, they passed the 110 test. No, I know they're ready because that receiver is used to 21,000 total yards in a week right now. That receiver has over 700 yards of high-speed work this week, and he handles it easy. And he has over 50 accelerations and 30 high-intensity deaccelerations. So I could say confidently he could go into that practice and go to work. He can do it.
And there's a lot of work that goes into getting that distance. When you think about, the number of people that are at football practice, the number of coaches that you have, equipment managers that you have, the amount of time that the NC2A allows you to be out there on the practice field. And then you've got to be organized and have a staff trained up so that you can get that amount of volume in within a week's time. And it takes a lot of planning and a lot of effort to get all of that taken care of. So what we found, what was the way to, we found the loophole, right? Like, we always look for the loopholes. Like, we want to be within legal bounds of what the NCAA allows us, but can we get realistic about training and being close to those volumes? The only way to do that is to get close in duration, right? Because that's the key. Like, volume is directly connected to duration. The longer the practice, the higher the volume. I don't care what anybody says, is directly connected. Yep. So for us, what we found was with the new NCAA bylaws, we could have coaches out there. Yeah.
Right now, it does take away from our 8 hours.
Right.
So what we did was I'll warm them up for 10. Coaches get a half hour. All right, or 20 minutes, whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
And these are our conditioning days. We call these support days. These are our Tuesdays and our Fridays. All right, these conditioning days. The coaches hammer them with Indy. I mean, it's high intense, it's specific, it's technical within the means of what they're allowed to do. we remove ourselves from the session, all the coaches, strength staff, football. And then what they do is they proceed to go through a captain's practice. So they're going to go into 7-on-7, right, or one-on-ones right away. Yeah. They do 7-on-7, and then they do team. All right.
It's scripted. And it's scripted to keep them organized.
It's scripted, it's organized, and our seniors do a really good job of making sure it doesn't turn into a circus.
Right.
All right. And we two spot, so everyone is involved. So it's not just guys hanging out. We've two spotted. So you got your ones and fours over here. You got your twos and threes over here. They're rotating within themselves. They're getting that job done. And they're getting work.
Yeah, and they get better focus and concentration when they do it that way versus there being a bunch of guys milling around, clowning and not paying attention.
So we get our yardages in, and then what we do is because we're allowed to let them wear catapults during that time. We're allowed the GPS. Yep. So what we'll do is once it's concluded, I give them a 5-minute break, and we look at the yardages. And based off that, I adjust what we're going to do from a conditioning standpoint at the end.
Perfect.
To fit, again, those thresholds. So if I only want to be at 80%, we might only do 4 stations instead of 7.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Or we might, if we're doing repeat sprint ability, we might only do 5 sets instead of 8 sets of 5.
Yeah.
Okay. And we adjust based off that. And what we do is we hammer that conditioning in roughly about a 20 to 30 minute time span.
Yep.
We do competition, and then we're gone. We're off that field. We're out. So when you look at it, I only ran them for an hour, right, on paper.
Yeah.
But they got over 2 hours and 15 minutes worth of work.
Yep.
And then now what we look at, it's 7,000 yards, it's 6,000 yards, and it's very, very specific conditioning to what they get in practice. And like I said, in camp, I could do it now. I could tell y'all, we had no knee injuries in camp, none. And I'm not bragging on myself. I think it's just a product of the fact that the specificity of the conditioning in the summer. They were prepared.
And you have to be working for us that will allow you to do that. And that was going to be one of my questions, but because of time, I skipped over that. But I'm glad that you brought it up because now, and not every state, but I know the state of Louisiana is allowed to do that same thing. And it's not just in football. So within the state of Louisiana here, the baseball coach has time in the fall to go out and practice and see live bats and live fielding and live pitching in the fall. Now, for you pitchers, that could be kind of tough because they're probably, hopefully they're getting the amount of rest, once that those workouts, cease before the season starts up in the spring. But that is a hot topic, and our primary target audience is going to be high schools. And so it's important for those coaches to listen to what you just said and allow the strength coach time to warm them up. And then you get your time and then you go back out there and finish up with what is needed to make it a day. Because if you don't, because you're only allowed 2 hours during a daytime, and that's in the NC2A, during the off season, if you're only allowed a certain amount of time and the coach doesn't allow you to take part in that workout, then that is time that you have to do something else instead of like weight room time or sprint times and stuff like that. So it's important that the head coach and the strength and conditioning staff are all on the same page. So I'm glad that you brought that up, because that is critical, I think, for a team's overall success throughout the calendar year.
Yeah, and again, it goes back to that relationship. I think sometimes, coaches get territorial and we get territorial.
Yeah.
We're like, it's our time. It's our time. I need those guys. And I'm like, and the thing is this, and if you're not practicing the sport, you're not getting better at the sport.
Yep.
Okay. It's skill development. Like receivers get better from running routes and catching footballs. Mm-hmm. Okay. I give them tools to help enhance that. That's my job. And I make them robust to be able to run more routes. Right. Okay. In less time. But the skill of catching the ball and running the route is what makes them good. If they don't practice that, you're screwed.
After COVID, when we were allowed to work with the team, the first month, the month of June, it was just the strength staffs, and the football staffs couldn't have any anything to do with them except, I think, Zoom meetings. But then in the month of July, they allowed the coaches to start doing individual, but there was no balls that were allowed. And so every pass was of completion. You know, when there's no balls out there, every block that an offensive lineman performs is going to be a pancake. And every pass rush a defender does is going to be a sack. And then you throw the ball out there when camp starts. And I thought that as a team here, we built up a lot of bad habits in the secondary because there was no ball. And wide receivers, you develop bad habits. And quarterbacks, every time the quarterback threw the ball, it was this beautiful imaginary pass, and the receiver would catch it. And so now I think it's one of the better things that the NC2A has allowed is these type of practices. And Coach Johnny Parker would always say that if you want to get better at playing football, do the things that you do on the football field. And the strength staff only augments that type of training.
Sure. So, I completely agree with you.
Yeah. So I got a question. So you touched on, sprint speed, max velocity sprinting, and it is a very hot topic, man. And a lot of people spend a lot of time doing it, and it's valuable. It's certainly valuable. But I want to ask you specifically about, sprint training and really about the distances and things. So, and you already touched on a little bit when you were talking about only, limiting the guys or only needing a certain number of sprints, 90 to 95% of their max velocity during the week of practice to maintain that. And I'm of that same belief, especially because of the size of players. I know that in soccer and some other sports, they may call for more reps, 6 to 10 reps on a weekly basis. But I think with football, the size and the speed and the power that these guys carry, I think that threshold could be a little smaller or a little less. But so my question is, when running during the off season, do you track your team's high speed sprint distances, all the stuff that they would be doing when they were doing their flies and things along that line? And what are your thresholds in velocities for the different positions? And is there a limit to the distance that you have your team perform daily? And I know, so there's a couple of parts to that question, but I was wondering if you could talk about that for a minute.
So when I look at the introduction to sprint training, okay, I'm a short to long guy. So like, if you're familiar with Charlie Francis, we're going to start with shorter accelerations. Now, does that mean we're not going to hit on the fundamentals of high speed running? Absolutely not. But we have to be smart in our entry velocities to getting upright, right? Because that's the biggest thing, is you don't want to turn around and put them in a situation where they get upright. They're not capable of holding some of the forces that come along with running at maximal speed, and they're not ready for it. You get muscle pulls and all those different things. So what we want to do is with our accelerations, we want to start out with heavier loaded resisted pushes or pulls. Okay. And we want to make sure that when we are free running, that it's at a 10 or 15 yard distance. Right. And we do that through races. We do that through different variation starts where we do waterfall style, all those different ways to get the competitiveness out of it. But early on, that's what we're going to do. My threshold, let me start with this. My threshold to drive speed is 90 to 110 yards planned of sprint work. Okay. Meaning if we're doing 10s that day, I need to get up to 90 or 110 total yards of 10s. If we're doing flies and that's all I have, if we're doing 10-yard build, 10-yard hold, I got to figure it out, right? Like I got to get to that 90 or 110. That's the goal early on. My maximal threshold is 320 yards of planned sprint work. And that would be skill guys only, my skinnies, end of summer, going into 7 days off. Right, like that's high volume. Now, I like to have themes. So like my concentric day, we're gonna have acceleration be our main theme on that Monday, and I like doing a heavy resisted. I like doing a light resisted, and then I like doing free sprinting. That's how I'll structure that day, and then we'll do a ton of races at the end to fill in the gap for volume, right? Why do I like racing? Because, again, it's extremely competitive. When I mean extremely competitive, I mean I've some fist fights have gone down because of guys getting after it, and they're running hard. They're running fast. And you can do it in a way where there's eye candy out there. So if all the football coaches, because football coaches hate seeing people stand around, right? If we do heats, though, I give the coaches something to look at every 20 seconds, right?
Yeah.
So I could go with my super fast guys, my first 15, go. My next tier, go. My next tier, go. And I have them run and then peel off and walk back.
Yeah.
And guess what? By the time they walk back, that's their rest time. Hey, we're ready to go, baby. Let's go. Here we go. Who's up? Who won that one? Oh, you're slow. Get the next guy down. Get your ass down. Let's go to work.
Yeah.
And I love races for that reason because it checks so many boxes.
Yeah.
We'll race up to 20 yards. After 20 yards, I've had some experiences where you go to 30 yards and you could, because there's trying to strain and jump for the line and all those things, you get weird things that happen. So I've stayed in that 0 to 20 yard mark for my accelerations, for my races. And then with our timing gates, I really like just timing 10s and 20s. I think it's just very simple. Like if I want to time anything past 20, I'll do a fly.
Yeah.
Right? Because now it's top speed, right? When you look at Ken Clark's research, what he found with the NFL Combine was at 20 yards, you're at roughly 90% of your maximum velocity for all those guys that were at the Combine. So, that's a maximal speed, maximum velocity event once you're past that 20 yards. So I want to make sure, again, we'll do flies and builds for those. When we talk about that Thursday and we talk about doing maximum velocity, where I love hurdle runs or wicket runs. I love them because I'll do them before we do flies because it gives them context. And it's a drill. I love drills where you don't have to coach much.
Right.
The drill takes care of it, right? They see the hurdle. They pick their foot up off the ground faster. They get more front side dominant faster, and it fixes their posture. Okay, so it gives me a really good jump off point from a technical standpoint. Okay, this is what you're supposed to feel when you open up. And then what we'll do is in the early offseason, we'll start with a 10-yard build and a 10-yard hold with our flies. And we get in the summer, I'll get up to 30-yard build with a 20-yard hold. And you want to talk about guys riding. Yeah. Guys moving. It's beautiful to watch. Yeah. I've had one kid. He was a 10-2 kid in high school, and he's a little small. He's a 150-pound cat. I've had one kid get 24 miles an hour on catapult where I could back it up with the acceleration profile, and that's in shorts and t-shirt.
Yeah.
So don't blow me up on Twitter because I said that, but but we'll get all the way up to that 30-20, and then what I'll do is from there is we'll have some high-intensity plyometric event that happens on that day, and we'll also have a light-resisted, longer-duration sprint where it's a buildup in nature where we are accelerating hard in the beginning so they can feel that transition into more upright sprinting because I don't want them to think that it's two pieces. It's one run.
Right.
When you look at that race model, like when we're in that early offseason, that race model, it's one run. It's not two different parts of it. So I want them to feel rhythmic. I want them to feel that transition, and I want them to get upright. But that's what we'll do. And again, so in a given week, the highest threshold I'll use is 600 total yards of planned running. The minimal I'll use is about 250. Yeah. And I'll go back. Now what we do is those are planned yards on paper, right? Those are based off our distances. What I'll do is I'll go look at our high speed thresholds on our catapult or our high speed acceleration, our high intensity accelerations, and make sure that we're matching what I think we're doing. Meaning, okay, like if I wanted close to 200 yards, but all my skill guys only got 110 over 16 miles an hour, well, and we're doing max speed work that day, I didn't hit the mark. So what did we do? What did I do wrong? How do I fix that? Or, hey, we're doing accelerations, but everyone averaged 4 meters per second squared instead of being up at that 5.5, 6 mark where you're really going. Like, okay, we didn't hit the mark there. What did we do wrong? Are they tired? Was the drills wrong? Whatever it might be. And we go look at that as well because I want to double check and make sure my work's on point.
You made a comment about sled pulls or resisted sprints, heavy and light. When you're doing your heavy and light resisted sprints, what is the percent of body weight that you use on those?
So when we go light, we're going to end up be between 20% body weight and roughly about 40% body weight. That's my threshold, my cutoff.
Right.
When we go heavy, we're starting at 90% of body weight and we're getting up to 100 plus.
Oh, wow.
100 plus, yeah, especially with our big guys. And that's more geared towards our skill guys. Early off season, we'll do some very heavy sled pushes and pulls. But our big guys, I mean, that's what they do. You want to talk about task-specific strength. Right. Pushing something heavy is what they do. So we have these red sleds that weigh 90 pounds. I have no idea what brand they are. They were here when I got here. But what I'll do is I'll have a big guy stand on the sled and he'll push his partner. And we'll go 10 yards and we'll go. And it'll be more geared towards explosiveness, right? We're trying to move it with speed, but you put a 320-pound guy on that thing, it's speed. It's moving like a Buick. It ain't moving.
All right, so I got a funny sidebar question here. All right, so when I see you running in the summertime, like y'all are killing some grass, okay? And so I know how the groundskeepers are in college football, man. I've been cussed out for divots and, not moving the drill around. Does anybody ever come out there and say, hey, coach, can you move the drills over? You're killing our grass. How much? Well, the grass grows. Y'all have good sun, and a lot of rain, but
we tear it up. We tear it. So, Coach Mike Stoops?
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Okay, so he's at Kentucky. He's the linebacker coach. Coach Stoops is my guy. I love him to death, right? He's an extremely intense, fiery dude. Yeah. All right, so when you heat him up, he's a volcano. He's going. Okay. When he was here as our DC last year, all right, you would have thought that our practice fields were his lawn.
Yeah.
Okay, so anytime we did anything that tore that grass up, he would come on that coach's balcony and rip my ass. Can we not move a drill? Can we not do this? It was the funny. And I'm looking at him. I'm like, what is it? Your lawn? So it's funny though because the other day he calls me and he goes, "How bad is that grass, you big goon?" The first thing he said.
Yeah, so, my first coaching job was at a high school, and we had one football field. We had 100-yard football field that we had to practice on there. We didn't play our games there at the school, but we had to practice on the field. So the head coach would come out every morning and check the field to see if I was moving around. He hated it. So I got trained early. So for my first 6 years of coaching, man, I would get fussed at and cussed at all the time about not moving the drill. So when I watch you, I'm like, there's some groundskeeper somewhere pulling his hair out right now because Joey is killing some grass.
Just pissed off. Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. All right. So we're starting to get to the end. So, but I got some more questions I want to ask if you have time. Do you have some time? All right, good. So this is, we're hitting on some hot topics here today. And this is why I love doing these podcasts, man, because I get my one-on-one coaching clinics in, and it's really been rewarding. Okay. So I get a lot of calls this time of the year, and this topic has come up at least 3 or 4 times in the last couple of days with different people I've talked to. And so my question is what does toughness training look like to you? And is it something that you think about when you're programming? Because like, for instance, Brady is a senior. They're in a big playoff game tonight. And his mom was telling me this morning, Jill was telling me that Catholic High is going to win because their players are tougher than the team that we're playing against, so everyone believes that mental toughness or physical toughness is a major part of the game. What do you think about it? And how do you program for it?
I think it is absolutely a huge part of the game. Coach Parker, I love talking to Coach Parker. I've gotten close to him the last 2 years, and he stated you can't take the gladiator out of football. Yeah, the gladiator aspect. It's part of the game. Any collision sport, right? Like there's got to be courage on impact. There's got to be some grit to you. There's got to be some toughness. Now, I think toughness is multifaceted, right? Like it's multifactorial. There's a lot of things that go into toughness. when you look at a really violent, explosive player, he tends to come off and people tend to say that he's tough, right? Like he might only do it for 2 plays and then run to the sideline, but everyone would say that he's tough.
Yeah.
When I look at a kid that's just extremely consistent and really hardworking, like the first thing that comes to mind to describe that kid is tough.
Yeah.
You know, he might lose in a street fight, but when you look at, and you think about him, you're like, well, that kid's tough. So I think it has to deal with specific instances and tasks, right? Like that's first and foremost. Like if you put a UFC fighter who's scared of heights in a plane and tell him to jump off and he pisses his pants, you're going to say he's soft? Mm-hmm. You know, like, so there's specific environments where you have to be tough and you have to have that certain attribute in you, that internal drive, the intrinsic motivation, that competitiveness to want to beat somebody. I think that has to be there. I think you have to drive and have elements in that in your training. There has to be, whether it's races, whether it's conditioning drills where you're challenging each other, whether it's, contact prep where, it's a tire pull. It's me versus you. There's got to be elements of that in there where there's physicality, where there's competitiveness, and where there is some grueling aspect of it in there. Because as much as we want to make it out to where this is this clean sport and everyone's in a fatigue state or non-fatigue state, and it's all about performance. All right, well, tell that to my old linemen.
Yeah.
That are literally in a fist fight for 60 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
if unless, like, I have friends, we all have friends that, look at the game from the balcony or, their TV, and they talk about how soft someone is or how we should have done this or should have done that. If they stood and had my view on the sidelines of a Southeastern Conference game, and you've been there, and if you stood on the sidelines and watched LSU and Ole Miss play, or LSU and Alabama, or Ole Miss and Mississippi State, the collisions and the sounds and the things that you see and hear are mind-boggling compared to what you see when you're sitting in the what do you call it? The suites, or you're sitting at home watching it on your 65-inch TV. There's nothing that compares to it in sports. I don't care. And it takes a special kind of person. In fact, you mentioned Coach Parker a long time ago. I asked him a simple question. What was the difference between a collegiate and a professional football player? And I was expecting him to break down a litany of exercises and drills. And he said competitive nature.
I agree. I agree with that 100%. And you see it between good players and bad players. Like there's not when you, especially I'm in the group of 5 level right now, and majority of the teams we play are very similar from an athletic standpoint to us. Mm-hmm. Okay. And usually when you look at on a given play, who's winning and losing on that play is the kid that has that higher competitive nature to him. I don't want to lose. I'm not going to lose. The anger behind it, the intensity behind it, and what they do where they hate losing more than they like winning. I mean, look at all the greats. I think me and you had this conversation a week ago. We were talking about, you watch Michael Jordan. You look at Kobe Bryant. All right, you look at Joe Namath. They did not want to lose. They were going to do whatever it took because they were driven by that feeling of winning. And I think because of the 7-on-7 circuits, I think because of all the ribbons, my son played, listen to this, how crazy this is. My son played in a travel baseball game last night because the football season just ended. They begged us to come out, so we come out. They were in a championship game where 2 teams forfeited. We shouldn't have even been in the championship game. We got run ruled, okay? We got run ruled, and they still gave my son a ring.
Yeah.
And the beauty, I'm trying to raise my son right, so my son hands it right back to his coach. He goes, "Coach, I don't want that." And walked off, Yeah. But we live in a society now where everyone wants to pat on the back no matter what. And I think you're starting to see it really start to hurt just sports in general, to where you get guys like I'm blessed to be around AJ Brown, who was one of the most humble dudes. But when you talk about one of the most competitive people, if I tell him I can hold my breath longer than him and we're sitting in my office, we're gonna compete. You know, and I know you had too many. And that's the biggest thing, because if you're willing to compete at that level, you're willing to prepare at that level. And then you understand, okay, if the higher the level that goes, the higher the level I go up, the more I have to put into it. And that's where the difference is where they start to understand, the really great players I've been around, they really start to understand, I can't show up and just do it, and I'm not going to lose, so I better do it. Even if I hate it, I better do it. And I think that's what real tough is.
Yeah, me too. Doing what you're supposed to do when you're supposed to do it, and doing it exactly like you're supposed to do it with every ounce of energy that you have in your body. When I was in high school, I got to go to this national level wrestling camp. It was held at Middle Tennessee State University, and they had I was like on a spree level, like I was like a kid, But they had the Pan Am team. It was actually a training camp for that year's Pan Am team. And I don't know, it was probably 1978, I guess, when it was. And so they held this training camp, and it was for all the different levels of amateur wrestlers. And at the time, this guy named Tad Thacker was and it was unlimited. I wrestled unlimited as well. And so your heavyweights could weigh 400 pounds if and I wrestled against 330, 340 pounders myself. But I was walking because this camp went on for a whole week, and I was walking by the game room in the dorm, whatever dorm we were staying at Middle Tennessee, and Thacker and another heavyweight, I used to know his name. I forgot his name, but they were playing this video game. This is right when video games first came out. And it was a football game where it had a round ball in the middle of the table, and you had to spin it. And here these two heavyweight wrestlers or unlimited wrestlers at the top of their game, and they were playing this video game, and they broke the top off the video game. They were competing against each other so hard. And I was a young kid at the time, and it really struck a chord with me on, like, here are these two wrestlers, and they're going to compete and wrestle against each other every day, 3 times a day at this training camp. And here they are playing this stupid little video game, and they're going at it so hard that they broke the top. It was on a pedestal, and they broke the top off the video game. And so, yeah, competitive nature is huge, man. It's huge. All right, couple more questions. All right. This one is a hot topic again. Well, not really. I think people really understand the difference today more so than when I first started coaching. But I know that you've got considerable experience working with women's teams in collegiate sports. And so, we've discussed some elite training practices here today. And would you have any reservations programming for women in a similar fashion to the way you train men?
No, absolutely not. I'm thinking athlete's an athlete. Now, I do think that you have to look at the demands of their sport. That's going to differentiate some training, but and then I also think that there is some injury trends and patterns with women in specific sports that you would have to address. Mm-hmm. But I mean, speed and power and strength, that's the same, no matter, whether it's a male or female, or if it's, a 15-year-old or an 8-year-old, like it's the same, and a human's a human now. And I think sometimes we tend to overthink some of these ideas that it needs to be completely different from what a male is and all those different things. Now, I will say there's been some research as far as like understanding when to deload females because of menstruation cycles.
Right.
And that's an interesting topic because I'm like that's something I never thought about when I was training volleyball.
Yeah.
Is that potential because again the increased stress on the body. But outside from that, I mean, it's still a person. Yeah. You're still training elements.
So that leads me to my next question. How would you program differently when working with preteens?
I think you just got to do regress versions of what you want to do. And you start there and you advance them based off their technical proficiency and their improvements. I don't think there's any set time limit for kids.
Yeah.
Right. You look at I'm looking at this because I have an 8-year-old and a 5-year-old, and I looked at like what the Russians did, what their programs look like, and what the Chinese do with their programs, right? Because they produce, when you look at the Olympics on a national scale, or on an international scale, a lot of gold medalists, a lot of speed and power events, and you see a generalization of training all the way up until about 12, and then a specialization starts at 12, 13, 14, 15 years old. And they're expected to be world-class at roughly 20 to 22 years old. World-class meaning whatever event they're in, hitting those world-class marks. And for me, it's like they're still doing sprint work. They're still lifting. They're learning how to lift and all those things. I think you just have to be smart. I think people mess it up when they try to break records as kids. Like a kid should not have a record broken in squat just to say they weren't armed in the squat. Like right. James, I'm not putting 95 pounds on the bar and bragging about my son squatting 95 pounds. Right. Like if he's squatting, it's to become a better mover at that increase those specific muscle groups that are involved with that exercise. That's the only reason we're doing it, right? There's a means to it. I'm not trying to make him a power lifter. I'm not trying to make him an Olympic lifter right now. I'm trying to just increase his athletic qualities and his general athletic qualities to make him better at whatever he's doing and handle his body better, right? And that's the biggest thing, is handling their body better. And I think when you have regress versions, okay, when you teach them to sprint early, when you teach them how to change direction the right way, when you teach them how to decelerate, the same things we're teaching these kids now, but you do it earlier and you do it with the right appropriate volumes and all those different things that come into that, I think you're really saving yourself a ton of headaches later in life. Like I think, especially for that athlete, I think you're really setting that kid up for success. The problem is all these parents live in, they want their kid to be the best 8U football player now.
Yeah. Right.
And it's not about long-term development. And to me, that's short-sighted. I know when I hit puberty, at 14 years old. As soon as I hit 14, boom, I sprouted. I was in high school. Freshman year of high school, I went from being 5'5", start of high school, to that Christmas break, I was 6'1". Okay? I knew it, right? So, knowing that with my son, knowing, okay, I could give him a competitive advantage because he'll be that in 8th grade. He'll be 14 in 8th grade. But understanding, okay, I can train him a specific way, knowing his maturation process, right? I can train it. There's certain windows of elasticity growth in kids where you can really maximize tendon and ligament strength. Okay. Right now he's in it. It's between 8 and 11 years old. And then it happens again and when we're between 15 and 18 years old. So again, understanding these windows, you could really attack some things that can make these kids special and really advance them as an athlete and scrape their genetic potential versus saying, okay, hey, we'll wait till he's 13 and then he'll figure it out.
Yeah.
No, I mean, by then it's too late. By then I was playing catch up in high school.
Yeah, exactly.
I was 14. I never lifted a weight. I went into a weight room full of kids that, a few of them been lifting for a long time and they separated themselves early. Now I caught up to them, but it took me a while. Yeah. Versus knowing now, my son, we've been doing speed training and he absolutely loves it. And it's been a game changer for him. So you talk about increasing his confidence, increasing his ability to play whatever sport he's in, and then increasing his overall athleticism. Mm-hmm. And then the body image, he loves flexing at me. I know I'm a meathead too, but he loves flexing at me. And as any father would want, you want a happy, confident kid, right? That's what you want. At the end of the day, no matter what they do, that's what I want. I want to be happy. I want to be confident. I want to be healthy. And that's what you provide kids when you do provide good youth training for these kids, when you do get them active. And I will say this, he plays 7 sports. So the more sports you can, that takes care of a lot of things. He does wrestling, jiu-jitsu, basketball, baseball, football. I'm probably forgetting some too, like track. There you go. Like, he's doing all these all the time. So it also helps out with burnout. I think when you start to specialize early, and you saw it with baseball, right? Like there's a ton of UCL, Tommy John surgeries because kids are getting taught curveballs at 7 to 8 years old because they want to be the best 8U pitcher and win a championship on travel ball at 8U versus long-term development, right? And making it at a higher level and learning fundamentals and learning just how to play the game and enjoy the game, which is going to help that too. So I think specialization really hurts some kids. I think you need to be as general as possible. And I think weightlifting is general. Yeah. And people forget that. Like, it's, you're trying to make them power. No, weightlifting is general. It's a means to an end. It's a means to an end.
Now, so you mentioned this about, kids are behind if they don't engage in some type of training when they're young. So, last question. No, next to last question, I promise. So, what are some things, there's two parts to it. So what are some things that you've noticed that your incoming freshmen are lacking in when you compare them with the rest of your team? Okay. And have you noticed if any of these weaknesses, not genetically, but could be geographically related? In other words, do you see some things in South Florida that you didn't see in Mississippi or Louisiana or Colorado or vice versa for that matter? So based on, where a kid comes from, are there any specific weaknesses or not that your incoming freshmen have that your varsity players don't have?
Absolutely. So we're down here in Florida, the second biggest sport down here is track. So we get a lot of kids. We get a lot of kids that come in, and we tend to be a smaller team in nature when you look at just our skill and mid-skill because of the type of kid we get. We get I'm blessed to work with some extremely fast, twitchy kids, but they lack size. That's, I think that's the biggest thing that I see down here in Florida because weightlifting isn't that big of a deal, right? And if they are doing it, a lot of times, I don't want to discredit some of the high school coaches around. They do a good job, but a lot of times it's just bust them up, throw them up. Let's get these guys and throw them, walking lunges 300 yards or something. There's no rhyme or reason behind it. So we get kids that are extremely fast with extremely low levels of work capacity. They do not handle volume initially at all. Like we'll do a bastardized version of Dvorakian complex. Mm-hmm. And I'm talking about, I've seen some of these kids legs shaking with 95 pounds on the second, third set. It blows your mind, right? So work capacity, I think, is major down here. I think work capacity. And then I think the second thing is just going to be upper back strength. And I think that's everywhere I've been. Everyone loves to press. They don't like doing pull-ups and rows and all these different pull variations. They don't like them.
Right.
Now when you look at geographically, because that's a great question, because I actually had this conversation probably about 2 months ago. When I was in Louisiana, East Texas is right there. We got a lot of recruits from Texas. All right. Powerlifting is the predominant off-season sport in Texas. So a lot of our kids that we got from Texas were already strong walking in the door. And I mean, squat 450, clean 300 and some pounds, bench 300 and some pounds, walking in the door. That was stereotypically what that kid was. Now, the difference was what I see with Florida kids and those kids, they weren't as fast and they didn't have some of the stretch shortening cycle capabilities that some of these kids had. They were more strength-based from an athletic standpoint versus more of a elastic athlete like these guys I have here now. Colorado, I had a mix of kids from everywhere. So and you saw it, California kids, they had high work capacity because they do a lot of 7-on in the off season. So they handle high levels of volume, but it was kind of all over the place with Colorado. Yeah. But look, the biggest difference I saw was Louisiana and here. So when I had those Louisiana, Texas kids and then the kids I have here now, that's yeah. And it's, you don't think there would be that big of a difference. But really, it's and this because you've had a lot of New Orleans kids. like when you get those inner city kids, a lot of times their work, exactly what we talk about, they're fast, they're athletic, but their work capacity isn't as good, or they're not as strong as the kid from a better, more well-endowed community that, has structured weightlifting and has, and you get that a lot too with high school programs. Like I know here, if I get a kid from Naples High School, okay, just like where your son plays at, right, is, when you get a kid from there, he's going to be able to clean squat bench. I know that right off the rip. And I know he's going to work hard. Or if I get a kid from Venice, like I have 3 kids from Venice. I love what Venice is doing. Whatever they're doing, they need to keep doing it. Because their kids come in, they have high levels of work capacity, they're extremely strong, and they have really, really good fundamentals of lifting. So that goes anywhere, versus like I get other schools and it's like, all right, I know they don't have the resources to have a strength coach, and that coach is doing the best job possible he can do, but it's definitely, there's a drop off.
Yeah. Well, that's why I asked you the question, because when I was in Miami, I saw the same thing. I left Tennessee to go to Miami, and then there we had smaller guys that were faster and twitchier, and their snatches and cleans and jerks were more dynamic, but they weren't, our linemen were not nearly as strong as what we had at Tennessee. And then when I came here, the same was true. And then whether they were kids from Catholic High or West Monroe High or John Curtis or, Rummel and John Ehret High School in New Orleans, those guys were going to be better squatters, better cleaners, better benchers than the kids that came from some of the other schools. And that's just the way it is. So that's why I wanted to ask you, because last night I was thinking about that question, and I wanted to throw the geographics in there to see if you saw some of the same things in South Florida that I saw. And it's true.
Yeah, and you look at like the Midwest, like those guys that are stuck indoors all the time.
Yeah.
You get a bunch of really good wrestlers.
Yeah.
Or you get really good basketball players.
Yeah.
And it's, you'll see that with like, you look at Iowa, what are they known for? They're known for old linemen.
Yeah, big, strong old linemen, yeah.
Yeah.
Guys that eat weights all winter long.
They throw people around on that mat.
Yep. Unfortunately, our time is up, man. I could talk all day. Got through almost all of our questions, but I really appreciate it. Thanks for joining. And it's been great talking to you. I mean, unbelievable. Make sure that you say hello to your wife, Bubba and Sophia, and let them know that I say hello. And I hope that I didn't get to enjoy it much, but I hope they're getting to enjoy some beautiful South Florida weather this time of the year. I would come home from work and Jill and the boys would be sunburned. So I hope they're enjoying some beautiful weather. And now for the audience, Coach Joey releases some great content on social media. So make sure you follow him on his Twitter and Instagram account, and it's at Coach Joey G. Again, at Coach Joey G. This brings us to the end of today's podcast. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you're someone interested in doing a podcast with us, or if there is someone that you would like to recommend as a guest, please email us at podcast@themoffittmethod.fit. I hope that you enjoyed the podcast today as much as I did. This is going to be a great one. If so, please subscribe and leave a review. For more information on the Moffitt Method podcast and all of our social media accounts, you can go to our website at themoffittmethod.fit. Again, themoffittmethod.fit. Thanks for joining in, and we'll see you again next week.